Before sunrise, the sea was calm enough to lie. A wide, empty stretch of Caribbean water reflected a pale gray sky, as if nothing important was about to happen. Then radar screens aboard the USS George Washington lit up. Not with noise. Not with chaos. Just clean, deliberate contacts moving into a place they did not belong. The kind of movement that was meant to be noticed. The carrier strike group had been conducting a routine patrol, the kind that rarely makes headlines and almost never invites confrontation. Crews were rotating watches. Aircraft sat secured on deck. The ship moved with the steady confidence of something that had crossed oceans without ever needing permission. This was supposed to be another uneventful morning. That assumption lasted less than a minute. The contacts were Venezuelan warships. Not passing. Not shadowing from a distance. They were turning inward, adjusting speed and heading with intention. Their formation tightened as they closed the gap, placing themselves deliberately across the carrier's projected path. It was not an accident. It was a statement broadcast in steel and wake lines. From the outside, the maneuver looked bold. A regional navy standing its ground against the most powerful naval force on Earth. From the inside, it looked exactly like what it was. A calculated political gesture designed for cameras, speeches, and domestic applause. The Venezuelan command wanted a moment. They wanted proof that they could challenge, delay, or intimidate a symbol of American power. Their ships moved closer, close enough that there was no ambiguity left. They were blocking the USS George Washington. For the first time since leaving port, the carrier's path forward was intentionally obstructed. The message was clear. Turn away, slow down, acknowledge us. Accept the narrative we are trying to create. What those ships projected outward was confidence. Flags flying, crews visible on deck, radios crackling with rehearsed authority. But confidence is not the same as strength, and presence is not the same as power. The illusion held only as long as no one examined it too closely. The Venezuelan fleet was small, aging, and stretched thin. Hulls that had seen better decades. Missile systems that relied on outdated guidance. Radar arrays vulnerable to interference they could not detect, let alone counter. Logistics chains that struggled to keep fuel and parts flowing even during peacetime. On paper, they had ships. In reality, they had limits. Their posture was fueled by nationalism more than capability, by internal pressure rather than strategic logic. Someone had decided that challenging a U.S. carrier would look strong on television, that proximity alone could substitute for parity. It was a gamble built on appearances, not outcomes. Across the water, the response was almost invisible. The USS George Washington did not change course. It did not broadcast warnings or raise its voice. Deep inside the ship, systems shifted states with quiet precision. A floating city of over 5,000 sailors moved as one without rushing. This was not panic. This was muscle memory. The carrier strike group doctrine exists for moments like this. Layers of defense, awareness, and control extending far beyond the horizon. Destroyers adjusted their positions subtly, not to threaten, but to observe. Aircraft crews received updated tasking without fanfare. Sensors widened their focus, pulling in more data than the Venezuelan ships could imagine. The carrier itself remained the calm center of the formation. 100,000 tons of steel, command, and air power, designed not to posture, but to endure. Its presence alone altered the balance of the sea around it. Not through aggression, but through certainty. Then this happened. The Venezuelan ships began to lose clarity. Their radars still showed the carrier, but the picture around it grew unstable. Communications between their vessels lagged, then distorted. What they thought was open water began to feel crowded by things they could not see. Their confident formation loosened, small corrections compounding into hesitation. No missiles were launched. No alarms sounded across the ocean. Yet the situation had fundamentally changed. The American response was silent dominance. A demonstration of control so complete it did not need to announce itself. The carrier strike group did not force the Venezuelan ships to move. It simply made staying in place unbearable. Every system the opposing fleet relied on began to feel unreliable, untrustworthy, inadequate. Commanders aboard the Venezuelan vessels realized something all at once. They were not facing a ship. They were facing a network. A layered, adaptive system that had already mapped their options and found them lacking. The illusion of strength collapsed under the weight of reality. Their maneuver had been noticed. It had been measured. And it had been dismissed. One by one, the Venezuelan ships adjusted course. Not dramatically. Not in retreat formations that would look humiliating on camera. Just enough to create space. Just enough to restore movement. Radios went quiet. The blocking posture dissolved into cautious distance. The USS George Washington continued on its original heading, unchanged, uninterrupted. Aircraft remained secured. Crews returned to routine. The sea resumed its calm, as if the moment had never existed. But it had. The lesson was not written in wreckage or fire. It was written in restraint, in the understanding that modern naval power is not about who shouts loudest or sails closest. It is about who controls the environment, who sees first, and who never needs to explain themselves. Some forces project strength by trying to be seen. Others project it by making confrontation unnecessary. Some ships are not meant to be tested. The moment never announced itself with sound. No alarms. No raised voices. Just a quiet shift deep inside American systems that had already seen everything coming. Long before the Venezuelan crews felt pressure, long before their commanders sensed uncertainty, the outcome had already tilted beyond their control. The sea looked the same. The balance of power did not. Detection is destiny in modern warfare, and destiny arrived within seconds. As Venezuelan warships moved into position, the USS George Washington's defensive network transitioned without drama. The AEGIS radar system came fully alive, not as a reaction, but as confirmation. Hundreds of miles of air and surface space collapsed into precise digital clarity. Every hull, every heading, every speed change. Nothing was guessed. Everything was known. The Venezuelan ships were tracked almost instantly. Their movements translated into data points, then into predictions. Courses were projected forward. Options were measured and discarded. What looked like a bold approach from the outside appeared, inside the system, as a limited set of very poor choices. This was not about aggression. It was about mathematics. Kill probabilities were calculated silently. Missile solutions existed before anyone on the opposing ships understood they were vulnerable. Not because weapons were about to be used, but because readiness demands completion. The U.S. strike group did not hope it could respond. It already had. From the Venezuelan perspective, nothing seemed wrong. Their radars showed the carrier. Their operators felt confident in familiar screens and aging interfaces. They believed they were watching the Americans. They did not realize they were being studied in far greater detail by systems designed decades after their own technology stopped evolving. This was 21st century warfare confronting 20th century tools. The AEGIS combat system was not simply more powerful. It was faster, smarter, and integrated. Information flowed without friction. Detection fed decision-making in real time. Reaction speed was measured in moments, so small they never reached human awareness. Across the water, Venezuelan radars struggled with clutter, lag, and limited resolution. Their crews saw shapes, not intent. Signals, not certainty. They had no indication they were already inside engagement envelopes that could not be outrun. They also had no warning of what they could not see. Then this happened. Beneath the surface, a Virginia-class submarine slid into perfect position. It had been there longer than anyone realized, moving with an acoustic signature so faint it blended into the ocean itself. Its sensors listened patiently, sorting the sea into layers of sound and silence. The Venezuelan fleet never detected it. They never could have. The submarine tracked every movement, every propeller change, every subtle shift in speed. It did not need to move closer. It was already close enough. Acoustic superiority meant the Americans heard the Venezuelans before the Venezuelans heard themselves. This underwater presence changed everything, even though no one on the surface knew it. Venezuela's submarine force existed mostly on paper. Aging platforms, inconsistent readiness, and limited training kept them tied to port. There was no counterweight beneath the waves. No unseen pressure pushing back. Only empty water and false confidence. Above and below the surface, the picture was complete. The Venezuelan commanders began to sense it before they understood it. Systems felt unreliable. Data conflicted. Communications hesitated. Their ships were intact, yet something fundamental was wrong. They were no longer shaping the encounter. They were reacting to it. They could not detect lock-ons. They could not confirm threats. They could not even be sure where the boundaries of danger truly lay. Every decision carried unknown consequences, and hesitation crept in where certainty had once lived. The American response remained unchanged. No warnings. No maneuvers meant to intimidate. Control does not announce itself. It simply removes alternatives. The carrier strike group maintained formation with quiet authority. Destroyers held their stations. The submarine listened. The carrier moved forward as if nothing stood in its way, because nothing truly did. That was the realization that finally broke through. The Venezuelan ships were not being challenged. They were being managed. Contained inside a tactical reality they could not influence. Their presence had been acknowledged, assessed, and rendered irrelevant without a single visible act of force. One by one they eased away. Distance returned. Formations loosened. Radios fell silent. The confrontation faded without spectacle, leaving behind only the understanding of how close they had come to a line they could not see. The USS George Washington never altered its mission. The sea resumed its quiet rhythm. To an untrained eye, nothing extraordinary had occurred. But modern warfare is decided long before the first shot. It belongs to those who see first, think faster, and control spaces others cannot even perceive. In that domain, confidence without capability is a liability. In modern warfare, the first mistake is often the last. The moment lasted only seconds, but every system involved treated it as if history itself were holding its breath. The sea was unchanged. The sky was clear. Yet somewhere between calm water and quiet air, a single decision pushed two nations closer to war than anyone on deck would admit. It began with a signal that should never be misunderstood. The Venezuelan patrol boat was smaller than the ships around it, faster, more aggressive in posture. It had spent the last hour weaving near the edge of the carrier strike group's outer perimeter, broadcasting confidence through proximity. Its crew believed they were still shaping the encounter, still applying pressure through movement and nerve. Then, the fire control radar came on. To an untrained observer, it would have looked like nothing at all. No flash, no sound, just energy moving invisibly across the water. But under naval doctrine, fire control radar does not suggest interest. It declares intent. It means targeting has begun. It means weapons are no longer hypothetical. On American screens, the change was unmistakable. The radar spike registered instantly, isolated from background noise and categorized for exactly what it was. A targeting solution, active and deliberate, pointed directly at U.S. forces. Not surveillance, not tracking. This was the final step before launch. The fatal mistake had been made. The USS George Washington did not hesitate, because hesitation is not part of its design. Automatic countermeasures engaged before human voices could rise. Systems that had been prepared for hours shifted states in fractions of a second. Defensive layers tightened. Threat libraries updated. Engagement protocols unlocked. Above the carrier, fighters were already moving. Pilots received clearances without urgency, because the urgency had already been solved. Aircraft were armed, fueled, and aligned not to intimidate, but to conclude. Missile systems across the strike group reached full readiness simultaneously. Torpedo solutions existed beneath the waves. Air, surface, and subsurface power aligned into a single, unified response. This was not escalation. It was inevitability. From the Venezuelan patrol boat, none of this was visible. Their radar operators saw confirmation of lock. Their commander believed pressure had peaked in their favor. They thought they had forced acknowledgement, perhaps even hesitation. They had no idea they were now seconds from total destruction. Then this happened. The countdown began silently. 22 seconds. That was all the time between activation and annihilation. The length of a deep breath. The time it takes to realize a mistake but not yet understand its consequences. Inside American systems, the patrol boat's future existed as branching outcomes, all of them terminal. Weapons were ready. Launch authority was aligned. No speeches were made. No warnings transmitted. Modern combat does not argue. It resolves. Somewhere inside the Venezuelan command chain, reality finally arrived. Whether through a secondary display, a delayed interpretation, or pure instinct, the patrol boat's commander understood the meaning of what had been done. The radar was not met with fear. It was met with silence. A silence so complete it carried unmistakable weight. At the 20-second mark, the fire control radar shut down. The signal vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. The patrol boat altered course, its aggressive posture dissolving into distance. Communications followed, slower now, careful, measured. A message was sent that did not apologize, but did retreat. The withdrawal saved lives. On the American side, systems stood down just as smoothly as they had risen. Fighters held position. Missiles remained in their tubes. Torpedoes stayed silent in the dark. The strike group did not pursue, because pursuit was unnecessary. Control had already been established. The sea exhaled. What followed was diplomacy, not through microphones, but through movement. Space was restored. The patrol boat rejoined its fleet at a respectful distance. Official channels framed the incident as miscommunication, as overzealous maneuvering, as a situation responsibly de-escalated. Both governments accepted the language. Both sides saved face. But those 22 seconds could not be erased. For the Venezuelan crews involved, the lesson was immediate and permanent. They had crossed from signaling into threat, from posture into provocation. They had discovered that modern naval warfare does not begin with warning shots. It begins with detection, confirmation, and completion. For the U.S. Navy, the incident required no reflection. The systems worked as designed. The people followed procedure. The response remained professional, silent, overwhelming. No missiles flew because they did not need to. Power today is not measured by destruction, but by restraint enforced through certainty. By the knowledge that escalation is optional when dominance is absolute. The most dangerous moments are often the quietest, when decisions are made faster than words can keep up. That patrol boat sailed away intact, carrying a memory heavier than any damage. It had seen the edge of consequence and pulled back just in time. In modern warfare, the first mistake is often the last.